How do I reverse that? Can I end broadcast?
Don't do that. Don't do that, Harsha. It started, so you should start now.
All right. All right. I seem to be hearing stuff in repeat. Why do I hear audio on repeat? Can somebody help me with that? I
Close the YouTube, Harsha.
Where is YouTube? Oh yeah, it was accidentally on. That's great. Perfect. So it's almost time to start. We'll wait for another minute and then we'll start. Hey Spandan, welcome. Welcome to all of you. We will start the stream in another minute. We're just giving a bit of an early start. Meanwhile, all of you who are here, please say hi so that I know you're here. All right, so it's 9:30. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on which time zone you follow. So I stay in India, so it's around 9:30 p.m. It's a Monday, so I'm sure a lot of office goers are here. But bear with me, this is going to be a very, very interesting session. So hi Spandan, hi Priyanka, Sujit, Venkat, Wine and Around. That's a nice name. Aditya, Ankita, hi to all of you. And welcome to this session. It's a very interesting session. This is a session about keywords. It's a very specific aspect of reading comprehension that we are going to discuss today. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Harsha or Harshavardhan. I'm one of the RC experts at eGMAT. I also handle critical reasoning. Some of you, any of you from the eGMAT world, have definitely seen me doing some sessions earlier. You might have seen me in the RC forums. Um, I've been taking sessions, free sessions and paid sessions for students for the last 5-6 months. I've been with eGMAT for 1 year, and I know a fair bit about RC. So this is going to be a fun session for all of us. All right. So let me also introduce my team today. So we have Shraddha here with me. I also have Kanupriya, two of the senior most subject matter experts at eGMAT as far as RC is concerned. We also have Atreya on support for any kind of technical assistance. So before we get any further, let me also thank the GMAT Club team. These kinds of opportunities are very, very interesting for us. We also get a sense of, how students are in terms of their preparation and how we can help them do better, whichever subject it is, whether it's CR or RC. So I hope you guys are looking forward. Let's get into today's agenda. Just give me one sec, guys. Yeah. So the first thing I want to discuss is your current approach to RC. So before getting into any RC session, the first question I typically ask my students is, how many of you truly enjoy RC? And so put that on the chat. How many of you enjoy RC? If you enjoy RC, say yes, I enjoy RC. If you do not enjoy RC, tell me you don't enjoy RC, and also tell me why. Those reasons are very, very important for me to know. If you do not enjoy RC, why do you not enjoy RC? If you enjoy RC, what is it you like about RC? So those points are very, very interesting for me. Why don't you put that on the chat? I'll give you some time for it. All right, so draining. So RC is a bit of an energy sink. That's what Tanya is telling me. Tiring to read, lengthy paragraphs. All right, what else? Depends on the topic. That's also a very interesting point. I'm sure a lot of you have this notion that, hey, there are some topics that I'm comfortable with, and there are these topics I'm not comfortable with. Some of you may really love science passages. Some of you may feel extremely agitated by science passages, like, what the hell is this? So we're going to discuss all that today. If you bear with me through the next 2 hours, You will learn an approach that is completely topic agnostic. The keywords aspects that we're going to talk about today, it has nothing to do with the topic. It's an approach that works despite the topic, and we're going to see that in this session. So that's something that's very interesting. It takes too much time, and sometimes it's too complicated. It takes too much time, but at the same time, in one shot you can answer 4 or 5 questions. So it is also very interesting that way. So it's good. Very happy to see those comments. And let's begin with understanding the rest of your approach. The first question I have for you, and this is just getting to know you better, is typically how long does it take you to read an RC passage? So I'll give you some options. Does it take you A, less than 3 minutes to read your typical RC passage? I know that some passages are very short, some passages are very long. So take your standard two paragraph medium sized passage. So does it take you less than 3 minutes? Does it take you somewhere between 3 to 4 minutes? Does it take you between 4 to 6 minutes? Or does it take you greater than 6 minutes? How long does this typically take you? Let's hear a few answers. So I see a few 2 to 3, 3 to 4. There are a couple of you more 3 to 4. I thought I saw 4 to 6 somewhere there. All right. One more 4 to 6. So none of you take more than 6 minutes. That's already a victory. Good evening, Anurag. Welcome. Lesser than 3 without understanding, 4 to 6. So I'll take that as 4 to 6, Pamela. Got it. So the next question I have for you is, you guys, when you're done reading the passage, before you move to questions, or once you've read the passage one time, what is your level of understanding of the typical passage? So again, I'm going to give you some options. Is it less than 50%? And this is your own self assessment, by the way. It's not like I gave you a test and evaluated you. We're going to do that later. Right now it's just self assessment. In your understanding, is your understanding less than 50% once you are done reading the passage? Or is it 50 to 75%? Or 75 to 90%? Or are you one of those RC Zen masters who have 90 to 100% understanding? Where do you fit in? So one person for around 6 minutes. I see a 75%. All right, that's good. Let's hear a few more. Couple of 50 to 75. Okay. 50 to 75 seems to be the general consensus of this group on average. So we're gonna I'm trying to get a sense of where does this class stand on average. Oh my. So one less than 50 and one more 50 to 75. Tanya comes in and says 50 to 75. So what I can see is an overwhelming number of you in your own self-assessment have 50 to 75% of understanding once you are done reading the passage. Now, if you want to get into that 730 plus range, if you want to get a score that is this good, what you need is a 90th percentile performance in RC. And to get a 90th percentile performance in RC, that requires that you be able to read any passage irrespective of length in 3 to 4 minutes. If it's a short passage, somewhere around 2.5 to 3 minutes. If it's a long passage, 3.5 to 4 minutes. If the passage is a real monster, as once in a while we will get those as well, maybe you can go till 4.5. But typically 3 to 4 minutes is the average time that you should take reading any RC passage. And what is the level of understanding that you have to get a percentage that is this good? You should be in this range. You should have a greater than 90% understanding. So all of you who are in that 50 to 75, let's hope that by the end of the session you feel a little more confident about hitting this. All right. Ankita says, I enjoy RC. Very happy to see that. I also enjoy RC. I'm very happy to see people when they enjoy RC. All right. So if this is clear, let's talk about what we're going to achieve today. So it's a very simple session, guys, in the sense of what I want to cover. I want to discuss with you what I call keywords, what we at eGMAT call as keywords. I want to make sure that you know what I mean by keywords. I want to make sure that you know how to identify keywords in a passage. And then, great, you have identified what are keywords. What do you do with them? I want to teach you how to extract meaning from the passage using these keywords. How by focusing on keywords you can unlock the meaning of a passage. That's what we're going to focus on. And we're not going to leave it to chance. We're also going to see how to apply all this knowledge to solve a question. So we're going to solve one passage here, just one passage, the 700 level passage. It's a very interesting passage. So with that, that's kind of the aim. I want to tell you what are keywords, how do you identify them, how do you use them to extract meaning, how do you use that extracted meaning to solve questions. Very, very clear on what we are going to achieve today. So let me quickly discuss with you the structure of the session we have today. So it's slightly different from the free seminars that we typically do on Saturdays. So the structure of this session is very simple. I'm going to give you the passage, the 700 level passage right at the beginning. You guys are going to solve it using your methods. If you're already following a keyword heavy approach, if you're already following the reading strategies that we teach, fantastic. Otherwise, feel free to follow your method. But first, you are going to solve an RC passage on your own. So this is one passage, 700 level, 5 questions. Once you're done with this, what we are going to do is we're going to check the accuracy and we'll come back to this. So once you're done with this passage, now we're going to discuss concepts. So I'm going to introduce to you keywords, how to identify keywords, how to extract meaning, etc., etc. Once we're done with discussing these concepts, then you guys are going to retry the same passage. There's no point in giving you a new passage. You're going to retry the same passage, but the difference is you're going to apply these concepts and see how it works out. And that's where the learning will come. If you are not using those specific approaches earlier, and if your answers were not as accurate as they could have been, any improvement from the session should typically be visible when you do the reattempt. And once we do the reattempt, then we can have a discussion on this particular passage, other key learnings, etc., etc. So who's looking forward? If you guys are looking forward, let's put some yes on that chat. I really like to see yeses. That shows that you guys are involved. I know it's late for a lot of you, so it's very, very important to have that energy. Bring that in. Let's have a few yeses before I move forward. Yes, we love to see those. All right, so now let's get into, before we start discussing the passage, very, very important point to note. All right, uh, please do not put the answers to these questions on the live chat, because your colleagues, your peers end up unfortunately looking at that answer choice and it kind of biases their thinking. So we don't want that to happen. We are going to use Microsoft Forms. So my colleagues will share the form for each and every question that needs to be solved. All you have to do is click on the form and you can give the answer there. Don't put it on the chat because it biases other people. If we are all aligned to this, now I'm going to give you, this is a medium sized passage, so I'm going to give you around 3.5 to 4 minutes max to read the passage, and I'm going to give you 1 minute per question. That's the expected time. So in total, around 8 to 9 minutes to do the passage. At the end, when before the last 1 minute, I'll give you a warning that hey, 1 minute to go. After, and let's stick to the time. All right, and then we're going to have a discussion. So if you guys are ready, question number one, rather the passage is right here. So Shada, if you could help by giving the first one, the form for this one. So the clock on my computer says 9:42. When it is 9:50, I'll call time. You have 8.5 minutes. So 9:40, 9:51. You have till 9:51, guys. You guys can read the passage meanwhile, and we'll also give you the form. Yeah, the form is there. Perfect. All the best, guys. Tanya, the form that's shared with you should have the questions as well. It should have the passage at the top and all the 5 questions at the bottom. You should have 5 questions in sequence. All right, guys, now you should be wrapping it up. Let's take another 1 minute and then we'll start discussing this. All right, guys, last 20 seconds. Make sure you wrap up and put in your final answers. At this point, you should start taking a shot if you're not done already. Five, four, three, two, one. And I hope you guys are done. So, meanwhile, on the chat, let me know how you guys felt about this passage. Was it easy? Was it difficult? Put in your thoughts about the passage. Meanwhile, let me pull out the accuracy. Let's see how we as a group perform today. All right. So, put in your comments, guys. How was this passage for you? Meanwhile, let me look at some accuracy numbers for the batch. So 1 minute, guys. Keep your comments going. Just give me 1 second. I'm just calculating all your accuracies for these questions. And the results are very interesting, by the way. You'll be shocked. All right. So let me read some comments very quickly so that we're. What did I miss while I was calculating that? So Ravish says it was easier. It seemed easy to me. All right, that's great. Medium questions were typical. Passage was easy to understand. Questions were medium. All right. Pressure to solve it quickly. Yes. This is what I gave you today was the typical time that you would have for such a question. Some answers can be answered with common sense. Perfect. I don't disagree with that at all, by the way. So when are we going to discuss the passage? We're going to discuss the passage at the end. So let's talk about how we performed in this particular passage. All right, because that's kind of important now. There we are. So if I talk about the accuracy of the group for this question, and I'm actually just tabulating everything I just observed. Question one, so roughly around 30, 33 odd responses for each of these questions. So question one had 30% accuracy. Only 30% of the people actually got this correct. So there was one particular option choice that was extremely popular. We're going to discuss that. Question two had an accuracy yet again close to 30%, and all the other options in this case had seemed equally popular. Question three, accuracy was only 21%. Now this is something I don't typically see. Typically I see in the first attempt I see around 40%, 45% accuracy with this question. So it's very interesting that I am seeing this particular trend here. Question four, 33% of you have got it right, which leaves question five, which 67% of you have got correct. So question five is the question that all of you seem to have enjoyed comparatively. So so, and as most of you say, this is not really a difficult passage to comprehend. It's fairly easy to comprehend, at least medium level. Still, you can see that accuracy for most of these questions is below 50%. And that's what we're going to work on. Once we are done with the session, I want to come back to these exact same questions and see how we perform as a group. So this is an official passage, by the way. It's not eGMAT passage or any other passage. It's an official passage. So before I even get into the session part of it, there are like three of these five questions which are very, very strong on the keyword aspect. So at least for three of these five questions, if the group is learning, I expect to see an improvement. We'll see at the end whether we see that. All right. So now let's talk about what are keywords. Now we are going into the concept phase. What exactly are keywords and how do we identify them? Very simply put, keywords are specific words or phrases used by the author. The author is the person who has written the passage. Specific words or phrases used by the author in order to make it more logically coherent, to make it more structured. Why are these keywords important? What is it about these keywords that is so great? These keywords, firstly, are not at all words that you do not know. These are words that you see day in and day out. These are words that you use day in and day out, but they have some importance. If you're able to catch these keywords when you're reading the passage, if you're able to ask a question, why is this word here? Why is this word or phrase here? If you ask that question while you're reading the passage, the understanding that you can unlock is very, very good. So an author typically uses these keywords in order to create a very logical structure for this GMAT passage, but there is a specific reason why any particular word is used. So for example, some keywords are words that are used to indicate a very specific meaning. So you guys are all preparing for GMAT, so you also have, what is critical reasoning. You typically have an argument. When you see an argument, you have a conclusion, right? Very often for a conclusion, don't you see a word like thus or therefore or hence? These are what in CR lingo we call as conclusion indicators, right? That's an example of a keyword. Even in an RC passage, the minute I see the word therefore, for example, I know that what is going to follow is some kind of conclusion that the author is making. The author is using this word therefore to indicate that he or she is going to make a conclusion. These are the kind of words that I want you to start paying attention to. Another example, cause and effect. The author wants to say that A leads to B. For example, work from home is a cause. Work from home leads to better productivity. So definitely there is a causality being implied there. That's a cause and effect word. Since, because are typical examples. All right. Let's talk about coincidence as well, not just causality. Coincidence is two events happening at the same time, two things happening at the same time. So you have these words like while A happened, B also happened. While X happened, Z also happened. The minute you see that word while, I want you to start paying attention right there. So this is one bracket of keywords. There are multiple. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just the list that we have made based on what we see very frequently. All right. So it's an evolving discipline, you can say. Let's talk about another type of keywords. There are keywords which the author uses in a passage just so that he wants to indicate some kind of a transition. A typical kind of transition is a change in the direction. Again, coming back to work from home. Work from home is great for employee productivity. That means the author is telling you something great about work from home. And then you see a word like however. When you see a word like however, you know that he's going to bring in a change in direction. However, work from home is causing a lot of stress in employees, for example, right? That's a change in direction. So that's one example of a transition. You could also have a transition in time. For example, the entire passage could be talking about things that happened 1,000 years ago, and then you'll see one word like recently. The minute you see that word recently, you know that the author is transitioning from 1,000 years ago to today. You should keep track of it while you're reading the passage. I hope these ideas are coming through. If it's coming through, click on yes. All right. I mean, put yes on the chat so that I know. So transition of some point, that's another way of using keywords. Now let's talk about a third type of keyword. This is what I call as to continue the same line of thought. And again, these are words that you have used when writing yourself. These are words that you see again and again and again, even in your GMAT passages. So when you see the word additionally, you know that the author wants to tell another point in the same direction. Moreover is another example for that. Then you have what we call as emphasis keywords. To such an extent, something happened and then something happened to such an extent that, so there is an extra layer of emphasis that we are adding here. So take a look at all these words that I've discussed in this slide so far. Are any of these words topic dependent? Is this a word like historiography or any of those other fancy jargon that nobody really understands? These are all words that you know. What I'm telling you is you need to start paying attention to these words. When I say you have to start identifying them from today, from the next time that you're going to read passages, what I really want you to do is to keep an eye for these kinds of words. Whenever you see these kinds of words, you should ask that question: why is this here? Why has the author put it here? If you can answer that question, you can predict the author's thought, and that's kind of what we will discuss. So coming back to the remaining types that we see, this is a very underrated type of keyword that is very, very popular on the GMAT, and it is extensively tested. Invariably, if you see words like greater than, lesser than, easier than, these are examples. Definitely 90% of the time, there will be one option choice that is testing you on this. By the way, for those of you who remember the passage you just read, this is tested in this passage as well. There is a question, there is an option choice that tests you exactly on whether you understood this comparison. While reading this passage, if you had focused on what this meant, you would have rejected that answer choice within 5 seconds. And that's going to be the beauty of it when we are going through this again. All right. So these kinds of keywords are what we call as comparison keywords. So it's comparing two entities A and B. Some A is greater than B, A is taller than B, something like that. Just as is another variation, we'll give an example for that in the future as well. The last type I want to emphasize to you is the author can use specific words to indicate to you that, hey, this is something I agree with or this is something I disagree with. For example, when the author, for example, is talking about research done by some scientists, and then the author uses a word like, these scientists incorrectly concluded that work from home is bad for productivity. Why is that? You should look at that incorrectly and ask that question: why the hell is this incorrectly here? And that's when you get the answer. This is because the author is trying to tell you, the reader, that the author does not agree with it. Hey, if I am the author, I do not agree with this. This is not my viewpoint. Similarly, you see a word like justly or rightly so. The author is indicating that this is my opinion too. You criticized work from home. I'm using your criticism to make my case in this passage, but I'm agreeing with you, which means I'm also not in favor of work from home. Are these concepts coming through? Before I get into exercises, I quickly want to make sure that we are all on the same page. Everything we discussed right now, how are we on understanding? Let's hear a few yeses if you guys are looking forward to do some exercises. Now we have discussed the type of keywords. The key point I want you to notice, this is not at all an exhaustive list. It's a evolving discipline. There are multiple other types of keywords that I may have missed. This is some of the major ones that are extensively tested, that we have seen time and again. So, quickly, shall we move on? Shall we do exercises? You got this. That's nice. Let's hear a few more, guys. I want to see participation before I get on to the next steps. We are going to do exercises. We have like 9 or 10 questions that are specifically to test you on keywords, or rather, get you into that habit of keeping an eye out for keywords. We're going to do that. Good. Very, very happy to see those yeses. Make sure you participate, guys. Otherwise, it becomes very, very difficult to follow, especially on YouTube. Adobe Connect is a different game, but on YouTube, it becomes very difficult. So, now, why does this? So, I'm telling you so much about keywords. The question you should ask is, why does this really work? In simple terms, as we discussed, the author is using these keywords with a very specific intent. They're added there so that the entire passage has a logical, coherent structure. It is there for a reason. And when you try to understand those reasons, that's when you get understanding. The author used that keyword for a reason, to indicate something. If you hold on, that keyword is an anchor word. If you identify it while you're reading, if you kind of ask that question, why is it here? And then if you predict what the author is therefore going to put in, then what happens scientifically, if I have to say, it's similar to what you call as priming. Have you heard of the concept of priming of pumps? In simple words, because you already kind of set in to understand that information better, you know what is going to come in, and therefore when you're actually reading that text, the ability of your brain to absorb that information is slightly better. That's kind of where we are coming from. Do we have to remember these keywords? Absolutely not. Good question, Dilip. Absolutely not. You don't have to mug it up or by heart it. That's nothing like that. As you start doing 5 or 10 passages, the minute you hit that 8 to 10 passage mark with an eye for keywords, most of the keywords are very, very standard. You will start figuring it out. Hey, you'll see this, however, in 10,000 odd passages that you would have seen on the GMAT. It's that common. So you don't have to focus attention on by hearting it. It's not a list. All right. So these are common words that you'll see again and again. So the concept is you're priming. So I'm using the same example. Work from home. The minute you're given that work from home has the benefit of improving employee productivity. So you know something good about work from home. And now from this moment onwards, if you see this word, however, I want you to pause right here. Pause here for a second. Ask that question. Why is this here? It's here because the author wants to bring in some kind of contrast. What is the contrast here? The author told you something good about work from home. So you're expecting to see something bad about work from home. Then, with that understanding, now when you read the next line, hey, work from home is unfortunately not very good as far as employee stress level is concerned. I gave you a simple example. In the simple example, you may think that, hey, why do you have to bother? But as the sentences get more complex, as your passages may get more convoluted, as jargon starts getting thrown in, then being able to do this prediction will give you a superb advantage that you do not otherwise have. You're able to predict. It means your mind already knows what is the kind of thing that's going to happen. Therefore, you're able to absorb it better. So that's kind of the logic behind it. It's as simple as that. That's what we're going to do time and time again today. All right. So let me quickly check up on other things. All right. Perfect. So with that, let me quickly tell you about our upcoming sessions. Of course, we're eGMAT. We do sessions every weekend, and we also do a lot of sessions on weekdays. These are the things that we do to make sure that our students do well, and even the GMAT community at large do really, really well. So we have a very interesting strategy session on April 17th. That's the upcoming Saturday, 7 a.m. PST, 7:30 p.m. IST. So this is all about strategy. So this is being taken by your GMAT experts. These are people who have seen tons of success stories. They have tons of success stories under their belt. We really know what it takes to score something like 760 plus. You're going to get a lot of insights from this session. So, for those of you who have GMAT on the immediate horizon and really need a little bit of strategy help, this could be a very useful session for you. Then, some of you may wonder, hey, what about quant? Are we doing something in quant? So, geometry, we got you covered. On Sunday, we have a geometry session. Geometry, I know, along with algebra, is one of the trickier topics as far as GMAT is concerned for most students. And therefore, we thought let's have a session on geometry, which kind of teaches you a very systematic way of approaching geometry, which you can scale up to a very very good level. We also have other sessions. It's not just subject matter. So as part of our MBA analytical or MBA analytical 2K1 series that we are having right now, there's a session tomorrow. This is about whether you should go for an MSX versus an MBA. So for those of you who know about this, Stanford also has this MSX program. That's an accelerated MBA. It's an accelerated business program. Whether to go for that or whether to go for MBA. So this session is being taken by Vijay Raghunathan, also an eGMATer, an ex eGMATer, who's right there. And on April 16th, for those of you who have Cornell on your horizon, why should you do an MBA from Cornell? What can you do afterwards? So we have a husband and wife combination, actually, Hasib and Kalaivani, who are both Cornell graduates and who are both EG Matters. So they are coming in to give us a little bit of knowledge about, why should you go for Cornell, what does it take, etc., etc. For those of you who are interested, this is also something up your alley. And finally, some of you have already pinged us about personalized study plan. Hey, I want to start on this journey for GMAT. What do I do? Get in touch with our strategy expert. They will speak with you. We'll understand what your starting ability is when you're planning to take the GMAT, how many hours you can actually devote on a weekday, how many hours you can devote on a Saturday or Sunday. We take all that into account. We create a plan that is very very specific for you. So this is of course on a first come first serve basis, because it's a one-on-one call that you have with a strategy expert. If this is something that is interesting for you, this is something you feel is useful at this stage of your learning, feel free to give this a try as well. So let's get into the exercises. All right. So the very first exercise, what I've done is I've marked the keyword for you. So what I've marked here in orange is the keyword on which the question is based. You need to answer the question, and then we're going to have a discussion about it. So this is a warm up question. In the subsequent 8 or 9 questions that we are going to do, I'm not going to highlight the keyword. It's your job to identify that. All right. So let's start with this question. Typically, you should take around 1 minute for these questions. All right. Let's go. All right, guys, you guys should be done by now. Let's take another 10 seconds. Three, two, one, and let's hold it. Let's quickly check the results. How did we perform in this particular question? And just give me one sec, guys. There's a 50-50 split. So half of you have chosen choice A and half of you have chosen choice B. So what really is the correct answer? Pamela says I'm taking notes. All right, point taken. I'll slow down a little bit for you. Don't worry about that. So as far as the split is concerned, around half of you have chosen option B and another half of you have chosen option C. Let's kind of discuss this particular question, shall we? So I already told you that in this case, I've identified the keyword for you. It's argued that. The question is based on the passage, which of the following is a conclusion made by the economist? Come back to your critical reasoning. When you talk about argument, the argument is the final conclusion that is being made, right? That's the final point that is being made by your author. In this case, you're given that, hey, using the facts that number one, shareholders own corporations, and number two, stock price always captures a firm's true economic value. So based on these 2 points, 1 and 2, economists are making the point that argued that, or in other words, this is their argument, this is their conclusion, this is the point they want to assert, it's what they want you to take away. So based on 1 and 2, the economists argued that, hey, shareholders should have more power, that's A, and executive pay should be tied to shareholder returns, that's B. So 1 and 2 are essentially the premises used by the economists to make the conclusion A and B. Is this very, very clear? The keyword is argued that. Argued that is a keyword that indicates that this is the point that is being made by that person. This is, in other words, this is the conclusion that is being made. So here you can see, based on 1, using the facts 1 and 2, the argument that is being put forward by the economists, or in other words, the point that the economists want you to take away. That's what you call as a conclusion, even in your critical reasoning, right? That point is that A, shareholders should have more power, and B, executive pay should be tied to shareholder returns. If this is clear, now it becomes kind of clear why option B is not the correct answer. Firstly, I'm happy to see none of you fell for option A, because option A, if you understand that argued that is a conclusion indicator keyword, you understand that option A talks about the premise. It's talking about stock price always capturing a company's true economic value. That's your point two. It's not the conclusion. It's the premise that is being used to arrive at the conclusion. So that's there. All right. Option B is wrong for a very interesting reason. If you fell for option B, it means you're not paying attention to the exact wordings that are used. The conclusion is that shareholders should have more power. Option B says that shareholders are already having more power. Are they the same? For those of you who chose option B, shareholders should have more power. Is it the same as shareholders having more power? Option B assumes that they already have power. That's not true. Which brings us to option C, which is the correct answer in this question. A significant component of executive pay. What is given here is that executive pay, that is all executive pay should be tied to shareholder returns, which definitely means a significant component of executive pay should be tied to shareholder returns. This is the only correct answer for this question. It's one of the 2 conclusions being made by the economists. And what I want you to take away from this is, if you had paid 1 second of attention to argued that and thought about it, hey, what is meant by when someone argues that that's someone making a point. So that's the point that is being made. You should very easily be able to reject option A. All right. So now let's look at examples. more exercises. Here on, you don't have the keyword. You have to and you have to identify the relevant keyword yourself. The question is always based on those keywords. All right. So let's get to it. The key takeaway: keywords can help us identify a conclusion being made in the passage. Argued that is an example. If you had seen something like thus or therefore, that would also be an example for this. So let's go to question number 2. Same approach. You will have the form. Typically, it should take you around a minute. All right, guys, let's get those answers in. Another 10-15 seconds, maybe. All right, last 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And all right. So let's get right to it. If I look at the responses for this particular question, most of you have got it right. So it's like 60-70% of the 70% of the batches got this one right. So I'm very, very happy to see that. So Narayan has a question. In general, inference questions won't have conclusion. Yeah, but you're talking about CR. So that's true. Typically in a CR question, you do not have a conclusion. That's to be inferred. That's true. But right now, let's look at RC. Don't consider this to be CR questions. Consider these to be RC questions based on that particular segment of the passage which I'm introducing to you. All right. So let's get into discussing question number 2. So here, what I really want you to pay attention is words like this. Economists began according to them. This according to them is very beautiful. This is the author's way of telling you that, hey, this is not necessarily as per me. This is according to somebody else. when you're reading the passage, you should be focusing on these aspects. You should take a slight split second here to identify that according to them does not necessarily mean according to the author. Because look at the question stem. The question stem asks you to find which of the following can be inferred from the passage. Whenever you see the word can be inferred from the passage is the author's domain. We are only concerned with what the author agrees with when you see a question can be inferred from the passage. Therefore, if it is something that the economist, if it's the economist's opinion, unless you know that the author has agreed with it, it would not be the answer to this question. So, for the 30% out of you who got this wrong, the reason you got this wrong is you did not pay attention to these keywords. That that the author is putting that there to tell you that this is not necessarily my opinion. So option A, why is option A not the correct answer? Because it's the economist point, right? The economists say that stock price captures a firm's true economic value, not necessarily the author, and therefore not necessarily what you can infer from the passage. Likewise, option B, significant component of executive pay should be tied to shareholder returns. Same logic. Option C is the correct answer. A lot of you got this. A lot of you got this, which I'm very happy to see. So there are at least a few economists. In other words, some economists, which is true. When you say economists began according to them, you know that there are at least these some economists who exist. So some economists think that a primary reason why shareholders. So this brings in both the economist belief and the reason behind this. This was the reason and this was the belief. Option C is the correct answer. Most of you got it, so I'm not spending too much time here. Um, Option D, I'm happy to see a lot of you did not choose it because this has the same logic as the first question. If you made this mistake in the first question, after the discussion that we had, you should not have fallen for this. It's the very same reason. What the passage says is should have. What option D says is they have. It's the same logic as the incorrect option in question one. So, are we having some fun here with this? Shall we go to question three? The takeaway here for you is sometimes the author uses specific words or phrases to let you, the reader, know that, hey, this is not necessarily my opinion, the author's opinion. If this is clear, then let's move to another type of keyword. So we're kind of covering the typical examples that we see. Let's look at question number three. All right, folks, let's get those answers in last 15 seconds. All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So let me see how we performed. Oh, wonderful. This is a very, very good result. I'm very happy to see this, by the way. Which means that you guys are paying attention. You paid attention to the concept we discussed. I'm very happy to see this. And I'll tell you why. Most of you have got the correct answer for this. Most, as in over 90% of you, have got the correct answer. And why I like this is one of the questions tested you on a very similar concept. The accuracy there was very low, but if you guys got this, then the next time you do that particular question, if you pay attention, then you should get that question right. So I'm very, very happy to see this. So the word that the key word here that makes all the difference for me is this word justly. What was this an example of? When the author wants to indicate to you his or her opinion of what is being said. So the author is quoting the researchers in Marina. These researchers in Marina are making some assertion, but this one word justly tells you that, as per the author, whatever assertion these researchers in Marina are making, it's totally fair. It's fair. It's correct. Or in other words, I agree with it. So it's not just that the researchers in Marina are saying this; it's something the author also agrees with. Which is why, for this question, according to the passage, what can we say about the levels of pharma drugs in the public drinking water supplies? It's not just the researcher's opinion that the drug levels were too low to pose any real danger, it's also the author's opinion. And I'm very, very happy to see over 90% of the batch got this right this time. Do you guys see this? If you talk about option B, why is this not correct? Because as per the author has told you, it is too low to pose any real danger, which means it's not really a cause of concern. Option C, option C, I would have been, usually I would see a few more people choose option C, because those were that typically tells me that you have not paid attention to this word justly. If you have not paid attention to this word justly, then it's very, very easy to fall for option C, because you would say that, hey, the researchers in Marina are saying this. You don't know if the author agrees with it. If you pay attention to this word justly, you will choose option A. If you do not pay attention to that word, you will choose option C, which is incorrect. So, do you guys see how paying attention to that one word can really make or break a correct answer for you? If you paid attention to that word, you chose A. If you did not pay attention to that word, you chose B. Chose C, which is the incorrect answer. Do you guys see that? This is kind of how RC passages pay, play on your mind. They're testing you. Are you really paying attention to those words? If you do, you will not find eliminating incorrect option choices so difficult. A lot of you also complain about the time aspect. Hey, it takes so much time. If you're paying attention, if you're spending that extra second here, rejecting option C is going to take you less than 5 seconds. You read the option, you know that, hey, this is not right. Less than 5 seconds. That is the beauty of focusing on keywords. So, is the concept coming through? I just want to do a quick sense that we are all going along in this journey very fine. Let's hear some yeses if these concepts are making sense, because that way it's my dipstick to see if the batch is learning before I jump into the next. Crazy Video says yes. That's a nice name. Thanks for that, Kirti. All right. So now let's go to the next question. And let's see how you guys perform here. So the key takeaway, as I discussed, look out for those words. When the author wants to tell you that it's not necessarily my view, that's what you saw in the last question. Economists argued that this, according to them, that's when the author just wants to tell you it's not necessarily my opinion. If the author wants to tell you that, hey, it is my opinion, he or she has a way of doing that as well by putting words like this. Keeping track of these small minute things is going to make or break your 90th percentile. So let's go to question number 4. Same exercise, same drill. Take around a minute. All right, guys, last 10 seconds and then let's get into it. Three, two, one, and let's hold. So let me quickly check how we have performed. Oh, wonderful. So I'm again very, very happy to see. So definitely I can see that the concept of author's viewpoint versus others' viewpoint has drilled into all of your heads. That's why you're getting this correct now, which I'm very, very happy to see that. So let's quickly discuss this question, shall we? So again, all of you who noticed this would have got the correct answer now, correct? You had this entire experts say that the experts say it is best to get vaccinated against COVID as early as possible, and then the author says, and rightly so. Just through these three words, the author is telling you that, hey, this is the opinion which I also share, this is my opinion too, I agree with this. If you got this, which is why, and most of you have got this, like 99% of the batch has got this, which I'm very happy to see. Option B is the correct answer. The experts say that whatever it is, it's best to get vaccinated as early as possible. And the author agrees with this. So, even as per the passage, what is true, or in other words, as per the author, what is true, getting vaccinated as soon as possible is the best approach. Option A, I'm happy to see nobody chose it. It's the exact opposite of what is being said. Option C, I think one or two of you have chosen this one. And this again, the option C for me is actually an interesting option. So there's a bit of learning here. So I'll delve on this. Option C says if a significant number of people do not get early vaccination, it is not possible to contain the spread of the virus. Why is this incorrect? All we are given is that early vaccination, let's say A, will help flatten the curve. Let's say B. All you know is that early vaccination will help flatten the curve. That does not mean that if early vaccination does not happen, the curve cannot be flattened. That's not true. There could be multiple other things that can help in flattening this curve. Maybe I don't do early vaccination, maybe I do something else. So this kind of brings to the point the idea of making inferences. So that's also something that you should start doing typically, though it's not keywords per se. The minute you start making these inferences, you will also be able to attack option choices such as this. The reasons why C is incorrect, because all you're given is that early vaccination flattens helps flatten the curve. Does not mean that it's the only way. So how can you say that if people do not get early vaccination, then the curve flattening is not going to happen? You cannot say that, right? Very important to make these kinds of inferences also. So let's get into the next question. So I like what's going on with as far as this is concerned. Most of you, 99% of you, got the fact that there's this keyword here which is very sneakily telling you the author's opinion, which is good. Now let's come to question 5. Now we're going into a different concept. All right, folks, let's start bringing those answers in another 30 seconds. Thanks guys for pointing it out. And YouTube has a bit of a delay, so it took a little while for me to figure that out. So yes, the question the what I was actually discussing, I'll rediscuss this, is that hey, when you have the options, I don't want you to just eliminate A and B and therefore arrive at C as the options. The idea behind that is the idea behind these questions is, if you're paying attention to these words, when you see option C, you know it's right. So it's more than a process of elimination. In these questions, you need to be arriving at the correct answer. So make sure you're trying to do that over process of elimination. The session is not about getting all these questions right. These questions are not overly difficult, as you would realize, but it's oriented towards highlighting to you, hey, there are these words that you need to pay attention to. You pay attention to those words, your ability to comprehend and therefore your ability to answer questions becomes much better. So keep that in mind. That's kind of what I was discussing when I was muted. So now we are all up to speed. So option A is obviously wrong. Option B is wrong. Option C is the correct answer. The core point is this one keyword, intern. It's a consequence. It essentially means consequence as a result. That's the synonym for all this. So these are all indicators of some kind of a cause and effect. This happened as a result, this happened. So indicators like this are very important. So as per evidence, insufficient level of recall value. If a company doesn't spend enough in advertising, what is the consequence? What happens? Insufficient level of brand recall. What is the consequence of that? This in turn, this insufficient level of recall value leads to customers ignoring their product for a competitor product. Or in other words, there is a real this is what happens is competitors choose a competitor product which has a higher recall value, or in other words, more well known. That's in simple words what recall value is. Which is why option C is the correct answer. Most of you chose this, so I'm moving on. Let's go to the next question. So key takeaway is, you always have these cause and effect indicators and all. You need to always keep an eye out for these ones as well. The minute you see something like as a result, that should set your alarm bells ringing. All right. So now let's get to question 6. So this is one of my favorite ones. Intern does mean thus as well, to answer your question one above. You're right. Both indicate that as a result something is going to happen. All right, last 10 seconds. Most of you are done. 3, 2, 1, and let's hold. So, this is a question where things got interesting. So, you guys are debating between B and E and D. So, there's a bit of everything. So, what is the correct answer now that we are done with the poll? Let me quickly check the results. Oh, this is extremely rare. It's like 45% of you chose option B, another 45% of you chose option E, and then the remaining 10% chose something like option A. Very, very interesting. So, what is the correct answer? That's the real question, is it not? In this particular argument, let's kind of understand. So, here, this word is important. This word is also important. And these are two separate keywords for me. Very, very, very important. Pay a lot of attention here. So let's start with accompanied by. What do you mean when you say A is accompanied by B or X is accompanied by Z or Y? When you say accompanied by, that is what you call as a coincidence. There are three terms here that are very important. This is useful both for your critical reasoning and for your reading comprehension. The three terms are all terms that you know, by the way: coincidence, correlation, and causality. Now, when you see the word A is accompanied by B, that is only coincidence. Coincidence simply means two things happening at the same time. All right? Two things happening at the same time. There need not be a single link between these two events. No link. It's just coincidence that A happened at the same time B also happened. It's like it was raining at the same time I ate a sandwich. There need not be any connection between these two. That's coincidence. Accompanied by is purely coincidence. So, what can you not infer? You cannot say that there is causality here. You cannot say that there is correlation. What is correlation? There is some connection. There are these two events. These two events are happening not necessarily at the same time. There is an event A, there is an event B. Somehow these two events are linked. That is what we mean by correlation. There is some link between A and B, these two events. That is what you mean by correlation. That is also not something you see here. Correlation is something like when A happens, B also seems to happen, and there seems to be some link. A is linked to B somehow. Causality takes it one step further. It's not just that they are linked. Yet again, these are two events, maybe happening at the same time, maybe happening at a different time. Two events. It's not just that they are connected in such a way that one event is the cause for the other event. That is causality. So, if you guys see the difference between coincidence, correlation, and causality, you need to look at this keyword accompanied by and ask that question: is it indicating coincidence, correlation, or causality? The answer to that question: neither. You're right. Correlation is not necessarily causality. The answer to this question is accompanied by is merely coincidence. You cannot say they are connected in any way. You cannot infer correlation. You cannot infer causality. Now let's come to the other keyword here: usually. When you say something usually happens, what does that mean? There is a high chance that it's going to happen. There is a very high likelihood that it's going to happen. Correct? You cannot be sure. Usually doesn't imply 100% certainty. So the operative word which I'm looking for here is what we call as certainty. Usually does not imply 100% certainty. Maybe, maybe not. But in all probability, there's a higher chance that it will happen. That's what usually means. Higher chance, higher probability, higher likelihood. So that's what usually means, right? Snehashish, in simple words, correlation simply means that there are two things, A and B. they are somehow connected to each other. That connection need not be causality. Causality means that A causes B or B causes A. Correlation simply means that, hey, uh, somehow whenever it rains, I feel like having tea. There may not be any causality here. I feel like drinking coffee or drinking tea. There may not be any causality here. It's not like it's because of the rain that I feel like having coffee. It's just that whenever it rains, not a coincidence. Whenever it rains, I will drink coffee. But there's no causality. It's not because of the rain. It's just because maybe I like having coffee. So in coincidence, the two things are not related. It's pure coincidence. In correlation, the two things are related, but the relationship is not causal. In causality, they are related, and the relationship is cause and effect. There is a cause, there is an effect. This is very, very important. This is extensively tested, not just in RC, also in CR. So make sure you understand this. Usually, I already discussed it, talks about certainty. Usually does not imply certainty. High probability, high chance, high likelihood. That's it. If that is clear, now you should be able to eliminate the incorrect option choices. 10% of you chose option A, but why is option A not the correct answer? Can you say with certainty that excessive sugar consumption leads to obesity and high blood pressure? The answer is no. Accompanied by does not imply certainty. You cannot definitely say that high sugar consumption leads to obesity and blood pressure. That's why option A is wrong. Why is option B not the correct answer? Or rather, option B is the correct answer. Why is option B the correct answer? Excessive sugar consumption is likely and usually mean the same. High probability, high chance, high likelihood. So excessive sugar consumption likely accompanied by obesity and high blood pressure. Yet again, look at the wording. No causality. I'm again using accompanied by, which means coincidence. Right? You guys can't hear me? I'm not on mute. You should be able to hear me. Perfect. All right. So yeah, option B. Why is it wrong? I mean, why is it correct? Because it captures both the usually part, which is likelihood, and accompanied by, which is exactly what is given here. All right. Option B is the correct answer for this question. Around 45% of the batch chose this, but that means only 45% of the batch chose this. 55% of you still got this question wrong. Think about that. And this is where the learning comes. Imagine paying attention to this when you're when you're reading the passage. Then when you look at this option, think about how long it will take to eliminate. It's as simple as that. Let's look at option C. Why is it wrong? Do you notice that the causality is being reversed here? First of all, there is no causality. First of all, option C, this fellow is assuming a causality. That's something that's incorrect. Even if there was a causality, do you notice that the order got reversed here? Instead of A causes B, I'm saying B causes A. That's also a reason why you should have rejected this. Option D, higher proportion of people who eat sweets. I'm thankful to see most of you did not choose this. It has nothing to do with this argument. Option E is interesting. 45% of you chose this. Why is option E wrong? I'm not denying that usually can also mean possibility. If it usually happens, then definitely there is a possibility that it happens. That's not the problem. The problem is, yet again, you guys didn't notice that causality piece. How can you assume that it leads to obesity and high blood pressure? Do you guys see this? 45% of you chose this. So let's hear some confirmation that you guys are on the right track. You guys understood this now. People who chose option E very specifically. This is an important one. Another says B is the easiest answer, so it feels like a trap. Absolutely. Sometimes simplicity, right? Sometimes. But yeah, the core point is there is no causality. How can you say it leads to it? We don't know. It's only accompanied by. That's the reason option E is not right. So we discussed two things. One is the concept of certainty, what is 100% certain, what is not certain. The other one is coincidence, causality, correlation. These are all very, very important concepts, so make sure you get this right. Now let's come to question 7. It's not the same question, there is a difference. So let's do question 7 now. All right, guys, most of you are done. Let's take another 10 odd seconds and then let's discuss this. Three, two, one, and let's hold. Let's start discussing this one. How did you guys perform? All right, so most of you have got this right. Around 75% of the class has got this right. And essentially, it boils down to two options. One is option B, and the other is option E. So I'm happy to see, compared to the last question, you're seeing last question, only 45% of you got it right. From 45%, with a very almost similar question testing you on the same concept, now 75% of you have got it right. That for me is improvement, because now you're getting it. So again, the core keywords are right here. Right. Again, let's talk about, we already discussed the three C's, that is coincidence, correlation, and causality. Yet again, accompanied by only implies coincidence. You cannot infer correlation, you cannot infer causality. So far we are aligned. Now let's come to the other piece. And this piece, similar to these three C's, here you have possibility, probability, and certainty. In the last question, what you had was probability with the word usually. Usually that's what happens, which means high probability, high chance, high likelihood. This question, talks about possibility. It can be accompanied by. You cannot even be sure whether in a majority of cases that's what you'll expect to see. It's not even a high probability outcome. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe only in 10% of cases excessive sugar consumption is accompanied by obesity. Maybe in 90%, we don't know. With can be, all you can infer is possibility. So there is a possibility. That's what can be means, right? So excessive sugar consumption can be accompanied by high blood pressure. Possibility. You cannot even say probability. And definitely you cannot say certainty. Is this coming through? Just with these two questions, we discussed some very interesting concepts. If you keep track of all this, it's going to be very easy. So, which brings us to the option choices for this question. Option A, I'm happy to see most of you didn't choose. By now, you should know. Causality, that's the reason it's not the correct answer. We cannot infer that. Option B here is the exact same option B, which was the correct answer in the last question. The 25% of you who chose the wrong answer, you guys chose the exact same answer as last question, despite the fact that I told you that the question is not the same. So I did not deliver a googly. There was a different answer choice here. So why is option B not the correct answer? It talks about probability. It says that usually, most likely, high chance it will be accompanied, but can be does not imply that. Can be only says it's possible. You cannot say probable. For those of you who chose option B, I hope now you're getting some clarity. If you're getting clarity on this, please put it on the chat so that we all know that we are learning. All right. So let's come to option C. Option C is fairly easy. It's again borrows from the same previous question. It reverses that causality, which by the way does not exist. Also, there is no causality. Option D was not really popular. Option B, you see what the problem is here. This part is right. You're talking about possibility. This portion is right. So where did we go wrong? Where did option B go wrong? It's in the other portion. It brings in causality. That's why option D is wrong. Option E was kind of the correct answer here. Why? Because this captures everything correctly. There is a possibility. That's what your can be indicates. That excessive sugar consumption is accompanied by. In this case, we are using the exact same word, so you know you're right. By obesity and high blood pressure. So option E is the correct answer. 75% of you chose this, which is an improvement from the last question. So there's a 30% improvement there from the last question. It's a very similar question, which means 30% of you got the concept very, very strongly. Happy to see that. So now let's come to another. This is just a side observation. You're anyway getting the session PDF, so do go through this particular portion. There's in the same passage we also have this other keyword, so much so. It's what we call as an emphasis or impact enhancing keyword. So it has been observed widely that excessive sugar consumption can be accompanied by obesity, etc. So much so, it has been observed to such an extent that several new age diets worldwide focus on sugar avoidance at any cost. So you guys can go through this later. Fundamentally, this is another keyword. This is one more of the types that we discussed in the concept phase when we were discussing the concepts. Let's go to the last set, questions 8 and 9. Let's do question 8, guys. All right, many of you are done. Let's take another 10 or 12 seconds for this. All right, so let's do a countdown. Three, two, one, and let's hold. So let me quickly refresh your results. All right, so again, I see 75% of the batch has got this right, which is good, which is good. So in terms of accuracy, we are beginning to focus on these specific things, right? Option B was the popular other option. Option C is the correct option, by the way, and B is incorrect, but was also slightly popular. So the remaining 25% of you majorly gravitated towards B. I'm happy to see very few of you chose A, because there is also a conceptual point there which I want to cover. All right. So these kinds of keywords are what we call as comparison keywords, where an entity A is being compared to an entity B, whatever that entity is. Comparison keywords, like I told you in the concept phase, it's one of the most tested but underrated aspects of GMAT RC. Most of the time, I'm telling you, 90% of the time, if your passage has a comparison like what you see here, taller than, heavier than, longer than, 90% of the time there is some option somewhere which is testing you on it. And if you pay attention here and understand what this exactly means and what it does not mean, if you take that extra second while reading, you can save yourself a lot of heartburn when you go through those option choices. Because I see a lot of students falter here. They spend a lot of time analyzing an option choice like A or B. This is a simple example, but even in the passage that you guys have solved, a lot of you have fallen for this exact same trap. All right, so let's talk about what's happening here. So we are given that humans today are taller than their ancestors, they're taller than their ancestors, they're heavier than their ancestors, and they live longer than their ancestors. So this is a comparison. What that means, and this is again very important, is that if x is taller than y, that does not mean that x is tall. It just means that x is taller than y. For example, let's take the example of option A, lengthy lifespan. I know humans have a lifespan right now which is closer to 100, but let's take an example. If your ancestral humans, if our ancestors had a lifespan of say 30 years, not so great, right? Given current standards. And today humans have a lifespan of 35 years. Will you say that this 35 is a lengthy lifespan? That's the point. Just because humans today live longer than humans yesterday does not mean that they are living long. They're still living only for 35 years. And that's a very, very important point that kind of gets missed when you're not reading carefully and then when you jump to that option. If you have understood this, there is at least one question you will do better in the original passage, the 700 level passage. Simple. Taller than, if I'm taller than you, that does not mean I'm tall. I could still be a dwarf, just that you are an even tinier dwarf. It's as simple as that. If this is clear, you know why option A is wrong. Lengthier does not imply actually lengthy. Option B, if you fell for option B, as did around 24% to 25% of the class, if you fell for option B, you fell for the trap of not figuring out what is the comparison. Humans today are being compared with human ancestors, their grandparents. The comparison in the passage is not between humans versus other species. Where did you get this other species from? How do you know humans today live longer than other species? That's not something you know, right? The passage does not tell you about that. The comparison given in the passage is humans today versus humans, say, yesterday. It's as simple as that. Rather, ancestral humans. For those of you who chose option B, I hope this is very, very clear. What the area where you faltered is very, very simply the fact that you did not notice properly what is the comparison. It's not between humans and other species. You have no idea about other species. How do you know? For all you know, no human lives longer than any other species. How do we know? We don't talk about animals at all, right? Somebody made that point about animals. Nowhere are we talking about other animals here. We're talking about humans being compared with humans. So that's a very, very important point. Option C is the correct answer because it says human ancestors. Yesterday's humans were not as tall as humans today, which is true, which is kind of what this comparison actually tells you. And believe me, this is one of the most tested aspects on your GMAT RC. Nobody tells you this, but I'm telling you this because we have seen it time and time again. Figure out where we are not. Option B is wrong. You're not talking about animals at all. Humans today versus humans ancestral. That's the comparison. You brought in other species. The passage did not tell you if you chose option B. So, very important learnings. When you see comparison keywords, first thing, identify the entities being compared. There is no human versus other species here. That's the point. Number two, comparison gives information on a relative scale. Lengthier than A is lengthier than B does not mean A is lengthy. It only means that A is lengthier than B. You cannot infer anything about the absolute value or the absolute scale. Again, very, very important point. If this is clear, let's move to the last question of your exercise. All right, a lot of you are done. Let's take another 20 odd seconds. We will discuss this shortly, Tanya. We are getting into it now. All right, last 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1. So most of you have provided your responses. All right. So around 80% of the batch has still got the correct answer. I'm very happy to see that. So I can already see a bit of an improvement here. So what is the real keyword here? What is that important word here? Most of you should have got it. There is this sneaky little word just as. Just as the sun's mass can be determined given knowledge of other variables, similarly, something else can be determined. So, again, this is also an example of a comparison keyword. Here, the two entities being compared, again, this is an example where you need to be very careful with how it's written. The two entities that are being compared is not actually the mass of the sun versus the mass of the object. You're not comparing the mass of the sun to the mass of the object. You're not, if you're comparing the mass of the sun to the mass of the object, for example, that's your option B, then you would say, hey, the sun's mass is so much bigger than the mass of the center, or vice versa. You're not comparing those things. When you say, if you went for option B, the sun's mass versus the mass at the center, that essentially what you're saying is these two masses are similar, just as is indicating that these two entities are similar, just as A, B, just as X, Y. And so X and Y are somewhat similar. So if you're saying that the comparison is between the sun's mass versus the mass of the object, what you are in effect telling me is that, as per you, the sun's mass and the mass of the object at the galactic center of the Milky Way are pretty much the same, are similar. But is that true? Is that what the author is trying to tell you here? Are those masses similar? The answer is no. So this is a question where you need to be careful about what exactly is being compared. And the answer, by the way, is option C. What is actually being compared is the method. The same way the sun's mass can be determined if you know these other variables like velocity, in an exactly similar way, the mass of the Milky Way can be got by looking at velocities of the stars. So, what are those two entities which the author says are similar to each other? Is it the mass or is it the method? That's the point. By the way, I did not compose this. This particular paragraph comes to you courtesy an OG passage. It's from one of the science OG passages. I just put it in here because it was very, very beautiful. It tests you on whether are you picking up what exactly the comparison is. And there was an official question that was based on this somewhere. So the correct answer is option C, because in all these other cases the comparison is incorrect. This is the only case where the comparison is correct. The methods are being compared, just similar to this method, this other method. Is this clear? Can we have a vote of confidence? And before we move on, we are done with exercises, by the way. Now we are going to quickly head back to the passage. It's as simple as that. So before I do that, let's kind of hear a few, make sure that we're all on the same page. We're there. Perfect. Thanks for that, Kirti, Dilip, all of you. So what we're going to do is very simple. I'm going to give you the same 7 or 8 minutes. This time you should be a little faster with it because you know the passage inside out. You solve these questions inside out. Same passage. Let's do it again. But this time, try to apply the things that you've learned. Try to keep an eye out for these keywords. I'll give you 8 minutes and I'll warn you when you have 1 minute left. All right, guys, it's around time. You should take around 1 more minute to wrap it up. So I'm giving a little extra time. I know I'm giving you one additional minute. Make sure you wrap it up by then. All right, guys, last 10 seconds. 3, 2, 1, and there you have it. Exam in 2 days. All the best, guys. Pamela, another. You guys should have fun with RC, especially after this session. So, while I calculate the accuracies, why don't you guys put on the comments how was it different this time? Did it make a difference? Did you feel anything different? If yes, what? If no, what? Let's see. Let's hear some comments. Meanwhile, I'll just calculate the accuracies for this particular set. All right. So, what are the comments? So many people are writing the GMAT very soon. Is it interesting? Questions we solved felt easier than CR questions. All right. Someone understood the paragraph, but still wasn't able to answer them. And of course, towards the end, of course, there's a bit of rush because you're learning something. It takes some time to get used to applying it under some time constraints. And of course, these sessions we are always pressed a little for time, so I understand that. This time paid more attention to the keywords automatically. That's a wonderful thing, Ankita. That's kind of the point of the session. So uh, I'm gonna kind of discuss with you each and every question. Let me first write down what we achieved last time. These were our numbers last time. You can go back in the video and check this later. 21%, 33%, and what have we written here? 67%, roughly. This was the performance of the group earlier. Now, I was a little worried initially, but towards the end, a lot of you came through. So now the same numbers as 60%. This one is also 60%. It was actually 59%. So 60% round out. Question 3, you guys still struggled. So I'm sure it's a very, very difficult question. So here you see a very strong improvement. Here you see a meh kind of improvement, some kind of improvement. It's still good. And then question 4, 65% of you got the correct answer this time. And question 5 also, there was a marginal improvement, that is 76%. So the way I see it, question 3 is the one question that still tripped you at a group level compared to last time. And all the other questions I can see a sharp improvement. This is kind of what I love to see. So what do you guys think? You guys think that, hey, this session has been useful for you? I mean, something you've learned? Your numbers seem to suggest to me at a very aggregated group level, your numbers seem to suggest that. But what do you guys feel? I mean, I think one of you were also asking about what the answers were. So if you guys want to know the answers, I mean, we're going to discuss that. But if any of you is hard pressed for time, the correct answers were D, D, E, A, and D. You guys can check this later. For any of you who's really rushed for time, but for the rest of you, we're going to discuss this. So some quick thoughts before we get into analysis, insights, whatever it is. Rashid, what did you say? Yeah, this time I understood the paragraph. Still wasn't able to answer some of them. No worries. It's a learning process. Over a period of time, we get better. That's how we build this ability. But some of you guys are really getting it. So for me, the key learning here is definitely there's been some improvement at some level. In fact, questions 1, 2, and 3, these three questions have a very, very strong keyword influence. There's a very, very good chance of going wrong if you're not paying attention to the keywords. And this difference, this sharp improvement in questions 1 and 2 kind of tell me that you guys got the concepts there. Question 3, you still had a bit of a confusion. And in these two questions, you also have a little bit of the keyword aspect coming in, but it's also about those other small words that you should be paying attention to. So for me, questions 4 and 5 is a bit of a ripple effect. I asked you to start focusing on keywords. You also ended up focusing a little more on the other words that matter, which are not conventionally what you call as keywords, but very, very important. So shall we move to analysis? If you guys felt that, hey, you learned something interesting today and what you learned is useful, please consider putting a like on this video so that the YouTube algorithm gods can figure out that this is something useful for more of your peers, more of your colleagues. So if you feel this was useful, do consider putting a like as well. I'm going to analyze this passage for you very, very, very quickly. The idea is not to go in depth. You guys have been through this passage 2 times, so I'm not going to go in depth, but I'm going to teach you how just using keywords I'm able to extract what's happening. So for example, in this particular slide, looking at defined as, the minute I see defined as, I know that what is going to follow is a definition. So some definition is being given here, aggregate measure of production. And then you have this other keyword, equal to. Equal to again tells me, you know what it means. So it means that whatever is being mentioned here, something that is equal to that is being described. So essentially you're getting the description of what is this aggregate measure of production, how to calculate that. Fundamentally, sum of gross values, etc., 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 all the way till this. This is a very long definition. But fundamentally, because I focused on this keyword, I know that what is being defined, what is being given here is fundamentally the definition of GDP. All right. So what has happened in this passage so far? The author defined GDP for us. And then the author says GDP is a basic standard to measure the standard of living in a country. And in turn, you guys remember in turn from our exercise, it's a consequence indicator, right? This in turn leads to this. In turn leads to economic well-being of the population. So standard of living, by being a metric to measure standard of living, in turn you're able to also measure economic well-being. So far so good. That's kind of what you should get. So what has the author done so far here? He presented to us, hey, what the hell is GDP? What is the definition? How do you define GDP? And fundamentally, what is it used for? Hey, it's used to do all this. Measure standard of living, measure economic well-being. Simple, right? That's my top level understanding of the passage without getting into the details, which I'm able to extract through keywords. Now let's go to, and you guys can have this after the session. So I've given examples for those keywords as well. All right, now let's go to the next part. Again, notice, however, I pause here and I ask the question. So the author before this gave me something good about GDP. What is GDP actually used for? How GDP can be useful? So what am I expecting here? Something not so great about GDP. I already have that in mind when I'm going in to read this. So, however, critics are of the opinion that the national GDP figures they do not reveal significant variations, etc., etc. Essentially, looking at that number, that GDP number, it does not reveal the internal variations within the region. That's kind of what he's trying to tell you, right? And here, all those of you who improved here in that first question, you got justly. Am I correct? This is the point that you would have got. So justly is a keyword, content is a keyword. Justly tells me that this is not just the author's criticism. This is not just that critic's criticism. This is the author's opinion. It's also coming through. The author agrees with this. The author says that this criticism is fair. Or in other words, when the author is writing this passage, he is also criticizing GDP. How is he doing that? By presenting an analysis he agrees with, which he's making sure that you agree with. So when you come to think about your main point question, when you come to that option C, which is objectively describing, it becomes incorrect. Objectively describing something means I'm not presenting my stand on it, I'm staying neutral to it. That's why option C is wrong here. Through that one word justly, you can figure out that the author is exactly in line with this criticism. So they justly content similar to argued that it's kind of what is the point that they're trying to make. So they justly contend that within each region there are areas of prosperity contrasting with areas that are not so prosperous. So this is what we're talking about. Within a region there are places that are doing well, but there are also these places that are not doing well. And then you have another and that is like additionally, moreover, essentially another point in the same direction. So one point is this one, the other point is this one. And that GDP figures on their own do not really represent the financial wealth. So one question that you should ask yourself, the author previously talked about, he said that it is used to define, GDP is used to measure economic well-being. And it seems like in this place he's ripping that apart. Because you're talking about economic deprivation, you're talking about financial wealth, or in other words, you're talking about economic well-being. So the author essentially is trying to tell you GDP is not really a good measure of economic well-being. He's done that by presenting the critic's argument, and he's indicated to you that he agrees with this. That's why he's presenting it. So look at all these keywords all across these passages. Look at how many keywords are there. However, justly, content, and that, they're all telling you something about the structure. Think about and that. You're getting something about how the author has structured it, right? He wanted to tell you that there is this additional point. So that's point 2. Just by focusing on that, you can understand the author's intent beautifully. Think about answering your answer choices with this level of understanding. Now let's come to the next portion. So if you had to quickly summarize what's happening in this particular paragraph, the author presented the definition of GDP. Hey, this is what GDP is. Then he told us what it's actually used for. And one of the things it was used for was as a measure of economic well-being. Then in the rest of the paragraph, he has ripped it apart. He's presented to you these critics' points saying why it's not really a good measure of economic well-being. And then he makes sure that this is not just, I'm not just objectively describing this is something I agree with, which is what makes option C incorrect. Everybody with me so far? And you see how we are analyzing the passage. This is what I really wanted to take away. So let's come to the second portion. The idea that rising national prosperity, by the way, I hope you guys paid a lot of attention to this time round. We built exercises around this. Those of you who did this would not have gone wrong in some of those questions. Can still be accompanied by. The word can indicates that it's not probability, it's not certainty, it's only possibility. The word accompanied by indicates only coincidence, no causality, no correlation. If you got this while you're reading this, again, it makes a huge difference to your actual ability to solve the questions. So the idea that national prosperity can still be accompanied by, the word still here simply indicates that contrast. On one side you have national prosperity, which is rising. On the other side, poverty. Despite that, you can still have something bad. Still indicates that contrast. See how I'm paying attention to these things. It's the opening line, and yet again, another beautiful keyword for you guys, and rightly so. We in fact built this into the as one of your exercises. But the difference is, from 30% accuracy, this question got 60% accuracy. Why? You guys focused on this time. You saw it, you recognized it. That's what I want you to do in your actual test also. Going forward, when you're learning RC, when you're practicing RC, do this, your RC will shoot through the roof. Simple. So essentially, what is the author telling us here? There are a lot of important words here which are not keywords, but you should pay attention to. The idea that rising national prosperity. Notice the word rising, which means increasing. It does not say high. It does not say high national prosperity. It does not say medium. It does not say constant. Rising. The minute you see the word rising, that means that it's increasing. It could be increasing from, on a 100-point scale, it could be increasing from 95 to 100, or it could be increasing from 10 to 15 also. The fact is, it's only increasing. That's the maximum you can say. Keep that in mind when you go to that question number 4. Those of you who went wrong in question number 4, that's where you lost it. And I think even question 5. So rising means simply increasing. Is the opening line, and rightly so. So the author's agreement that critics present against the use of GDP as a measure of general well-being. You notice again, there's a difference between paragraph 1 and paragraph 2, right? What is that difference being presented here? Paragraph 1, the core focus was economic well-being. It's all about the financial and economic stuff. Here he's talking about non-economic stuff, general well-being. So when you talk about your standard of living, there is a money component and there is a non-money component. In the first paragraph, the author went after the money component, saying GDP is not a good measure of economic well-being. In this second paragraph, he seems to be going after general well-being, the non-economic component also. And that's why you don't see anything related to money here. Increase in pollution, all those other things that you'll see in the rest of the paragraph, nothing here is about money. Again, if you are ready to pay a little more attention when you read, you'll catch all these nuances. That's what I want to get you with. Answer for question, which one? Question 9. See, yeah, all right. People have answered that. All right. So, what's actually happening here? Now, the author goes on to tell you why GDP is not a good measure of general well-being also. And again, and rightly so, indicates to you very clearly that the author agrees with the critics. And also, all these lines are given by the author, not by the economists. So that again, not by the critics. So that again gives you some credence to the author also doing this criticism. So, what is the exact reason given? Can still be accompanied by. You can have an increasing GDP, that's your national prosperity or national output. You can also have these negative things, relative poverty, pollution, which are all indicative of standard of living at the end of the day. So there is another keyword here which it's an example indicator. With the minute I see such as, my mind automatically tells me these are just examples. Pollution, other negative externalities as examples. It's an example indicator. So those 3 keywords help me unlock the meaning of this. Now if you go to the last portion, also another point in the same direction, just like additionally, moreover, etc. So in addition to the previous point about pollution, etc., now we are seeing Furthermore, more points about why GDP is not a good metric for general well-being also. That's why you see things like all these other quality of life and all that. So output figures reflect nothing but little. This is the one place where a lot of you might have faltered. This is not a keyword, but it's just a phrase that you need to understand. What exactly is meant by reflect nothing but little? I'll give you an example. Think about a reflection. When you're looking at yourself in the mirror, what happens? When you're looking at yourself in the mirror, if you raise your hand, your reflection will also raise its hand, which means it reflects perfectly. The opposite of that is what's being talked about. Reflects nothing but little means that based on one, you cannot say anything about the other. Very less. Exactly. You cannot say that you cannot if A reflects nothing but little of B, that means that looking at A, you cannot really predict anything about B. If it was a perfect reflection, if I raise my hand, my reflection will also raise its hand. If there is a rise in GDP, there will also be a rise in quality. That is what would have been the case if it is reflecting properly. When he says reflect nothing but little, what they're trying to tell you is even if GDP is rising, that does not necessarily mean that your quality, etc., is improving. It does not reflect. An improved GDP number does not really reflect on other things like quality. Just because that is doing well, you cannot say this is doing well. Just because that is doing well, just because that is doing badly, you cannot say that this is doing badly. You cannot say predict anything. It could be this way or that way. That's the point you need to understand about reflect nothing but little. So, an example here for you. Shauna's grades reflected nothing but little on her intellect. So, what that means is she's extremely intelligent, but maybe she did not get good grades. Just as an example. If that is clear, output figures, or in other words, GDP, reflect nothing but little on quality of goods and services. In simple words, this means that just looking at output, you cannot say that quality of goods will increase or decrease. You don't know. You cannot say anything. It could be this way or that way. Not to mention that the quality of life for many could be severely diminished. Not to mention is also another keyword. We're sharing the PDF with you. Take a look. It means to state something that's very obvious. So, not to mention that the quality of life for many could be severely diminished if the increase in national output has been achieved at the expense of leisure time, working longer than usual. How many of you paid attention to this? Longer than usual. Comparison keyword. Our questions 8 and 9 talked about comparisons, right? Very important. So, just because these workers are working longer than usual, it does not mean that they're working long hours. For example, you could be talking about a country where people typically work for 3 hours in a day. Maybe now they're working 3.5 hours in a day. They're still working longer than usual, but will you say that they're working long? Mostly no. Again, comparison keyword. Keep an eye out for this. If all this is clear, then what happens in this paragraph? The author fundamentally now explains why it's not a good measure of general well-being also. So it's not a good measure of economic well-being, it's not a good measure of general well-being, or in other words, it's not at all a good measure of the standard of living. That's kind of what the author is trying to tell you. So that's kind of the summary. Presented the uses, gave you the definition, what is it used for, then he told you why it's not a good measure of economic. Here he told you why it's not a measure of good measure of general well-being, and then by making sure that he indicated his agreement, you know that this is the author's view. So in effect, the author is this is you should consider this as the author's criticism. It's not describing third party criticism, which is why the correct answer here was option D. Initially only 30% of you got this correct. Second time 60% of you got this correct. Why is that? If as I discussed, if I'm objectively describing something, I'm not giving you my opinion of it. Objective description is very neutral. Option D is therefore correct. Option C is incorrect. I hope this is clear. But this should be clear. With all the discussion that we have had, this should be clear. All right. Now let's go to the next question. So fundamentally, the problem with this one is it does not capture the author's view. All right. Now, and again, the point is that keyword. If you had figured out justly and rightly so, eliminating option C would have taken you 5 seconds. You would have immediately gone to option D. It's as simple as that. That's why focus on keywords. You will get all this right in no time. Question 2 was, which of the following can be inferred from the passage? Very, very simple. What was the accuracy? Again, the accuracy improved to 60%, which I'm very happy to see. The correct answer was again option D. Some of you fell for option C. Do you see option C? What's wrong with option C? Do you know whether workers are working for long hours? That's the problem. Are you guys with me? Is this concept coming through? Please put a yes if this is clear so that I know you guys are following me. I know it's pretty late. We just hit midnight now in India. But we are about to wrap it up. I just want to make sure that those of you who are there for the learning are getting the best out of it. So, option A, why is it wrong? Do we know anything about countries where disparity is little? The author does not talk about those kinds of countries, so you should not be choosing that option. Option B, increase in pollution and other negative changes. Negate any increase. This is again, the key word is to understand what negate means. What does negate? We know that at some level, along with rising national output, you can also have these negatives like increase in pollution. Does it mean that increase in pollution is negating the output? Or in other words, are you telling me that these bad things that can happen are nullifying any good thing that's happening because of national output? You cannot say that. If you really think about it, option B also makes no sense. Option C, again, this is the option which I told you. Some of you chose this. All of you who did not focus on the comparison keyword, you could have fallen for this. You don't know whether anybody in this universe of this passage is talking about long hours. They're talking about longer than usual. That's not long. Option D is the correct answer. And you will get this if you understood that phrase, reflect nothing but little. So, an increase in the overall goods produced by a nation does not on its own signify a corresponding increase in the quality of these goods. That's what you mean by reflect nothing but little, no? Just because output is increasing, you cannot be sure that quality is increasing. So, option D, correct answer. Option E is, again, you don't have any information about countries with high GDP anywhere in this passage, so you cannot make an inference. These are what we call as out of scope answers. Question 3. This was the one question where, despite what we did, the accuracy increased. It increased, of course, it increased. Some of you were better the second time round, but it was not as much of an increase as I saw in the first two questions. So, the correct answer, by the way, was option E. And by the way, this is based on that keyword. What is that one keyword? Again, something that you guys have seen. Where is it? Yeah, here it is. I was searching for you. Intern. The usage of GDP is somehow linked to measuring the economic health of the population, because that's also what intern means, right? By measuring standard of living, which in turn helps you gauge the economic well-being. So there is some relation there that is being told about. That's what option E actually covers, which is the correct answer. Let's look at the incorrect option choices, because I think some of you are very, very confused about this. Let's look at option A. How do we know that these, anywhere does the passage tell you these are threats to the economy? No. None of these are presented to us as problems that exist. Nobody told us these are threats. There is a difference between those two. That's why option A is not the correct answer. Option B, an increase in national prosperity. Look at this option choice. Most likely accompanied. If you had paid attention to that keyword, you know to reject this option choice. This is why you pay attention to the keyword when you're reading the passage. When I saw this, I looked at this, I saw most likely, and I connected it with, hey, the passage he says can still be accompanied by. That was an immediate reject for me. Option B, therefore, that's the only reason it's wrong. Look at option C. Even if there's an incorrect distribution of wealth, GDP fails as a measure of income of the country. We don't even know if GDP is measuring income. To be fair, it's measuring output as far as the passage is concerned. Even this portion, I'm not really on board with. But even otherwise, the author only criticizes GDP for not representing an equal wealth distribution. It does not tell you anything else. Does it really measure fail as a measure of income? We don't know. Let's come to option D. Again, it assumes a relationship, increase in output and quality. But what do you mean by reflect nothing but little? Based on one, you cannot say anything about the other. Or in other words, there is no definite relationship being implied. So if you understand what reflect nothing but little means, option D can be eliminated. So which option E is the only correct answer to this question. So I hope this was very clear to you. Don't worry, we're also giving you this material. You guys can go through this. This is an official passage. You'll also see the explanations out there. Let's talk about the inference question. That's question 4. Which of the following can be inferred? Now, very, very easy because we have done all the analysis for this. We talked about this, right? Does the passage tell you about national high GDP? Yes. No, I mean, not exactly, but it is still the correct answer. But why is it the correct answer? This is something you can infer from the paragraph 1. What does paragraph 1 say? It is a GDP is somehow masking things that are otherwise be present, right? That internal variations, that inner variations or inner differences, unemployment, black spots are there. Even though your GDP may look nice, if you look internally, there are places that are doing very well, and then there are places that are doing very, very badly. Or in other words, your GDP may be high, but it is still masking some problems that are being hidden, which is why option A is actually the correct answer if you really think about it. Let's talk about your accuracy here also improved fantastically. I was very happy to see that from 33%, your accuracy in this question increased to 65%. So let's talk about option B. A high GDP is a false indicator of the success. Do we know anything about success of a nation? Does the passage tell you anything about success of the nation? The answer is no. That's the reason. Option C is for me a very interesting option. Some of you chose this, but the problem is the passage does not make a comparison between high GDP and low GDP, and you cannot infer it either. I'll tell you why. Option C says citizens of countries that have a high GDP are not necessarily better off than citizens of low GDP. We don't know. All we know is that your GDP does not really reflect the economic well-being. That's all we know. We don't know. For all we know, even it may be true that even despite the fact that GDP is not a very good measure, a high GDP country is still better than a low GDP country. That could still be true. That could be true along with the fact that GDP is not a good measure. So option C for me is very interesting, but the problem is the author does not get into this comparison of high GDP versus low GDP. You cannot really infer that. You need to be very careful with option C. Some of you chose this, so make sure you're clear on that. Option D is completely not the correct answer. It talks about increase of GDP usually achieved. Again, look at that one word. You know that word will make it incorrect. Achieved at the expense of quality of life. Again, we don't know anything about quality of life. And I'll tell you one more thing. We're both with option D and option E. If you guys noticed, both of these are entities that are discussed only in paragraph 2 in a completely different context. How many of you noticed that? How many of you noticed this when you're solving this question? Hey, the question is asking me about what is the critic's contention in paragraph 1. Option D and option E are talking about things that the author brings in only in paragraph 2. How many of you noticed this? The people who start noticing this while when you start looking at the option choices, you guys are in for a treat. You guys are definitely at that level where you are observing those small minute things. How many of you noticed this? Let's have a quick round of yes or no. Anubhav, thank you for the response. Others also, make sure you participate so that I know. But this is the core point which I want you to take away. That's the fundamental reason why both options D and E are wrong. And even otherwise, if you really go into the logic of it, you'll see it does not really make sense. So the question was about paragraph 1. You're bringing in things from paragraph 2. Which brings us to the last question, last and sweet question. Which of the following is based on the contention that output figures reflect nothing but little on the quality of goods and services? If you understood what uh, reflect nothing but little is, now you know what I mean by that. Based on one, you cannot say anything about the other. That's what it means. And if you notice that this entire paragraph is talking about rising national prosperity, not extremely high. You don't know anything about extremely high national output. You don't know anything about extremely low national output. All you're given is rising. Rising could be from 90 to 95, or it could be from 10 to 15 also. It could be high, it could be low. You're not given anything about those. If you figure this out, if you spent a minute on rising here, for me, eliminating option A, option B, immediate. Option C, very same. National output remains the same. The passage is talking about rising output, not stagnant output, which remains the same. Those are the reasons why A, B, and C are immediate rejects. Option D is the correct answer because it conveys that exact sentiment of reflect nothing but little. Hey, just because your national output is rising, notice how here he put in all those incorrect terms, but here he put the correct term, increasing or rising. Rising national output not necessarily accompanied by a rising quality of goods. That's what reflect nothing but little fundamentally means. So option E you should not have fallen for. It completely inverts the relationship. You cannot infer that at all. So my takeaways, and I hope for some of you these are the takeaways. I told you what keywords are. These are those words or phrases that the author uses, kind of to make the passage more coherent, but to convey some specific meanings. So we saw all the examples, and a lot of these you actually saw in this passage. All right. Keywords hold clues about the author's content. What should you be doing when you see a keyword in your passage? You pause. You ask the question, why did the author put it here? That gives you that can get you in line to thinking what is going to follow. What will the author follow up with? And then finally, that tells you that kind of primes your mind to understand what is going to happen, and therefore your comprehension is better. With this understanding, you go to your option choices. Getting a 90th percentile is not that difficult also. 90th or better, 95th, 96th, not that difficult. This is one of the key things that you should understand. So I'm done from my side with the sessions. Is there any other questions, any feedback for me, any comments? I know it's a fairly long session, so I'm happy. I'm grateful for all of you who stayed with us, and please give us feedback on how the session was. So for all of you, for those of you who joined in later, who were not there when I talked about this, we have a strategy seminar on Saturday. It's going to be very, very useful. Kind of tells you what you really need to do in terms of not from a subject perspective, but from a how to go about studying perspective to crack that 760 plus. Do register, do consider registering for this. Geometry session for all of you who are a little worried about geometry, not very comfortable with how geometry is. Make sure you apply, you register for this session. It's going to be an eye changer for you. It's going to be a game changer for you because you're going to see a very standardized and structured approach to attacking geometry. That's something you don't really learn in your school, right? And MBA analytical series, we have these sessions going on. For those of you who are interested in this, please also consider getting a season pass for this. And it was about whether you should go for an MSX versus whether you should go for an MBA. Most of us think about MBA, but there are these other things that you can typically go for. So we have eGMAT alumni who are going to come and speak to you about this. Similarly, we have a session that's about whether you should go for an MBA from Cornell. If you want to go for that MBA from Cornell, what is it that you should be doing? So yet again, all these sessions are eGMATers. These are eGMAT alumni who have been successful, who cracked the GMAT, who went to these colleges. So if this session made a lot of sense to you and you kind of want to explore what is it to make your own study plan, please get in touch with us. You can book a call. These things, of course, first come first out. So make sure you do it early if you're planning to do this. That's it from my side. Happy learning. Any further comments, anything I can help you with, I'll be very happy. So Kanak, you asked me about next sessions. So yeah, this is. So I think I just briefed you about the next sessions. So I think we answered your question there. Thanks, Tanya, for that feedback. Snehashish, thanks a lot. All right. So from my side, I'm done, guys. Thanks a lot. If you have any other questions, I can, which is RC related, I can help you out probably. And if you enjoyed this session, and if you feel that it helped you, please consider putting a like also. It helps us on the YouTube front, of course. Feel free to do that as well. And I don't know how many of you are not subscribers to the eGMAT channel, but do consider subscribing because the content there is very useful nowadays. Especially, we're posting a lot of solutions. We're actually taking some of those very difficult questions that you see on the GMAT. We are cracking it open for all of you. So some of those videos definitely going to improve your performance. So do consider subscribing to the eGMAT channel as well. I promise you, it's worth it. So thank you, KP and Shraddha, for staying through and helping out with all the polls. All right. All right, then. So I think we're done, guys. So till the next time, happy learning. Good luck to all of you with your preparation. Some of you are taking it in the next 2 days. I hope the session was helpful to you. Make sure you do well, do your best. As I always say, do your best and leave the rest. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night.